I know seen some faces before, or some folks who are just here for tonight. I'm Melissa Edwards. I'm the Executive Director at the McAuliffe Shepard Discovery Center, and very, very happy to do that role and be here tonight for this amazing event. I want to say a big shout out, thank you to the Concord Monitor for not only organizing this part of the evening, but being really a big excitement of starting this whole process several months ago, and being both very thoughtful about including us and telling Krista's story in an amazing way. So I want to say a big thank you to them. Yeah, a big round of applause to them. And also, I want to say a big thank you to Ricky Arnold for traveling quite a distance to come and be a part of this panel tonight and a part of our events. We really appreciate that. And thank you to all of our other participants in the panel tonight for taking the time and sharing your memories and your thoughts about Krista. So with that, without further ado, I'm going to introduce the editor of the Concord Monitor.
Thank you everyone for coming to this very special event tonight. I am Jonathan Van Fleet, the editor of the Concord Monitor. I also wanted to start with a few thank yous. I wanted to thank our panelists. I wanted to thank the staff at the Discovery Center. I wanted to thank NHTI for this beautiful space, ConcordTV for their continued efforts to keep the community informed, and most of all to you, the members of this community that Christa McAuliffe loves so much. All of us are here tonight because we either remember Krista or we want to learn more about her. And I think it's fair to say that her memory is alive and well in Concord, New Hampshire, evidenced by the people in this room tonight. Over the years, the Concord Monitor has, and many editors and reporters before me, has strived to cover the teacher Christa McAuliffe with dignity and respect, and I hope we accomplish that again this year. Our coverage was led by Rebecca Pereira and Rachel Walkman. To them, I say thank you. You've helped us all rediscover what Christa McAuliffe meant to the world. And now, I'll turn it over to them for our panel discussion. Thank you.
Well, hi everyone, and thank you so much for being here. I'm Rachel Walkman. I'm the community editor at the Concord Monitor. 6 months ago, we began formulating plans for what would eventually become the Krista's Legacy Project, which so many of you have either read or picked up tonight. In the time since then, we have interviewed over 36 people, 4 of whom are sitting here with us today, including astronauts, former students, scientists, community members, and more. Our work seeks to illuminate Krista's indelible spirit and her far-reaching impacts as an educator, a leader, a Concordian, and a steadfast advocate of the power of ordinary people to achieve the extraordinary. We honor her alongside the rest of the Challenger crew, a group of 7 individuals dedicated to pushing the frontiers of space exploration to new bounds and inspiring younger generations to do the same.
I'm Rebecca Pereira. I'm the Monitor's news editor. Thank you all for being here. Neither one of us grew up in Concord, neither Rachel or myself. We came to this project from a place of genuine journalistic curiosity and a general awareness of who Christa McAuliffe was as a member of this community, a significant historical figure here with roots both in Framingham, Massachusetts, and here in Concord. We'd seen her statue go up on the State House lawn, and we'd watched voters kind of file in and out of the Christa McAuliffe School during election season. Over the course of this project, though, we've grown to know Krista more deeply, not only as the teacher in space, but as a person, an educator, a neighbor to many of you, many of the people on this stage, and someone whose legacy is, like John said, very much alive in our community. 40 years have passed since her death, but the students who she taught still carry her lessons with them. One of them is here, Kris. And our community still remembers the traits that made her Krista, her infectious laugh, her enthusiasm, the innovation that she brought to the classroom. We met each of our panelists through interviews for this project, Their names and their parts of of Christa's stories, the ways that their story intersect with hers, can be found in our reporting. And tonight you'll get to hear more from them yourselves. So thank you all for being here. Thanks for joining us, and we'll get right into it.
So we'll start by having our 4 panelists introduce themselves, and we're going to ask all 4 of you if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and the ways that you've been impacted by Christa's legacy or involved with it in some way. And we'll start with you, Ricky, although some of us already got to meet you a little bit.
Hi, I'm Ricky Arnold, a retired NASA astronaut, but I was a classroom teacher for 15 years, a science and math teacher. And I distinctly remember this day 40 years ago because I was working at the Environmental Protection Agency, and I had was going out to move my car in Washington, D.C. I was a new government employee and couldn't afford a parking space. So that's what I would do at lunchtime, is go move my car. And I came back in to check in to show my badge, and they had the live government television as all of this unfolded. But I distinctly remember thinking, I had not considered a career as a teacher until really NASA pointed out how important and just what a great and important job being a teacher was. And so I ended up becoming leaving government service behind, at least for a while, until I went back to NASA and became a teacher. When I was selected to be an astronaut, and I think this was all burning in the back of my head for many years, because I was selected for an astronaut in 2004, so quite some time had passed. And I think the most tangible connection now is that a team of us, including Joe Acaba, another teacher who became an astronaut, were able to complete some of Christa's lessons while I was on the space station in 2018.
Thank you. We'll go next to Kris.
Hi, I'm Kris Jacques, and I graduated in 1986. So I was a senior when Christa went up in the Challenger. I now teach 5th grade at Maple Street School, Harold Martin in Hopkinton. And I guess the best way that Christa has, and I probably should call her Mrs. McAuliffe, but over the years she's become Christa, has stayed with me in my teaching role is to really, the tender way she reached out to every student and she engaged every student in every lesson. She made lessons real for kids, involved us in our learning. We weren't just sitting there and information was just given to us. We were always involved. As a person, I think she has really taught us to go after what we want to do and not stop evolving as a human being, or not stop going after what our dreams are.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Young, and I work for, excuse me, New Hampshire PBS, and I had the honor of doing a documentary about Christa in 2024 when the statue in her honor was created on the State House lawn. I think it was a real privilege for me because I grew up in this area and I was able to go beyond the headlines. I think when you hear quotes from her growing up, they kind of lose their power. And what I was able to do is like reconnect with who she was as a person from the ground up. And what my takeaway was in going through that journey was that she was actually an ordinary person, but who loved her job and who loved being an educator, and she cared so much about other people. And that was extremely inspiring, and I was really able to, I think, take that almost into my own life and recognize like how important it is that ordinary people care about what they do in the world.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'm Amber Woods. I work here at the McAuliffe Shepard Discovery Center. I'm the archive and collection specialist here. I have a little bit of a different background because I was not alive during the Teacher in Space project era. So my early understandings of Christa was pretty limited, but I did attend Concord High School, and from attending Concord High, I learned, kind of the basics about her, that she was a social studies teacher, and that she was chosen as the first teacher in space at NASA. And at that time, when graduation was looming over my head, I didn't realize how simple of the fact of that she was a social studies teacher and worked with NASA would be so impactful in my life, because at that time I was pretty nervous about choosing a college major. I was worried that this one decision would narrow my career path. But Christa was a shining example that one's field of study doesn't impact it doesn't limit the impact that somebody can have. I mean, it doesn't define you either. So I ended up pursuing degrees in the social sciences. And yet today I work at 2 science-focused museums. But even though I don't have a heavy STEM background, I still find I contribute meaningfully to institutions that focus on scientific curiosity. And as I got older and I learned more about Christa, what really stood out to me was that she was known as a field trip teacher. Her philosophy that education continues beyond the classroom really spoke to me. Because to me, museums are powerful spaces where education, goes beyond textbooks and classrooms and allows all generations to continue to explore and to learn. That's why I pursued a master's in museum studies. And I'm lucky enough to work here, and Christa's legacy reminds me every day that curiosity is boundless, and most importantly, that teaching and learning can happen anywhere.
Thank you to all of you for introducing yourselves. You come from such diverse backgrounds that converge around this subject that we're here to talk about more tonight. But we'll start with Ricky. You traveled here from Maryland, and we're so glad that you could join us tonight. The Challenger's mission was to circle the Earth for 6 days and deploy a satellite that would study Halley's Comet. Christa's personal mission was to do what she did best. She had intended on teaching. She had planned lessons about liquids and microgravity, effervescence, things that you talked about in your talk just now. But could you tell us a bit about the process of redeveloping Christa's lost lessons and teaching them aboard the International Space Station for people who weren't there listening to the talk that you just gave?
Sure. As I explained a little earlier, the typical training flow for an astronaut going to the International Space Station is usually around 2 years. I was assigned about a year prior to my mission, which is, you're getting ready to go away for 197 days, and you have a whole lot of things to learn, like how to fly a Russian spaceship. It's a pretty late in the game to accomplish even those tasks. But as a mere coincidence of schedule, it turned out that Joe Acaba, who was another teacher who became an astronaut, was going to be on the space station for 6 months prior to my arrival. He would finish his 6 months, he would leave. 2 weeks later, I would arrive, and I would be there. Well, it turned out to be 7 months, but it was supposed to be 6 months when it was advertised. That's another story. But I think all of us paused at the education team, particularly down at Johnson Space Center, and certainly probably at headquarters, paused and said, hey, we're going to have a teacher on the space station for an entire year. And started kicking around what we could do given the short time constraint to plan. It takes years to develop payloads or experiments to fly on the International Space Station. So a conversation came up, well, what if we went and found the lessons that they were going to do on the Challenger mission, and maybe we can do some of those. They had to find them. I think they probably had existed at the Challenger learning centers, and folks kind of coalesced around this idea. But we didn't have a space shuttle flying to the International Space Station anymore where you can really cram a whole lot of last-minute materials and supplies. So we kind of had to wing it a little bit in terms of we don't know what's on the ISS. We had some idea of what would be there. Big stuff we know. It's not like one of your kids' rooms, right? But for specific disposable science equipment, sometimes stuff's kept, sometimes it's gotten rid of. So we weren't sure what was going to be waiting for us. To the point where, as I said earlier, the day I launched, I'm riding on the bus out to the pad, and my doctor handed me some packs of Alka-Seltzer to carry in the pocket of my spacesuit for the experiment we were going to do on effervescence, because I didn't want to arrive to the space station and not be able to find something that was going to bubble in water. So we had the plans. We had to be given the time by the planners, because I was up there. I did 3 spacewalks on this mission. I was flying the robotic arm, fixed the toilet, anything that goes. I was a regular astronaut. You have a lot of duties during the day. You had to find the time. The planners helped us find time. I did some of it on my own time. And I think the thing Christa would have been most proud of is scrounging materials together and making a lesson out of it that kind of got across a complex scientific principle, which teachers across this country and around the world do every single day. And because I didn't get a chance to practice any of this stuff, sometimes it went wrong, and sometimes in amusing ways, sometimes in frustrating ways, but that's what happens in our classrooms every day. So I think what the lessons themselves were a beautiful thing, because I feel like it accomplished part of the mission that the Challenger crew set out to do and sacrificed so much for. But the other piece of it really, the whole endeavor was kind of what our classroom teachers do every single day. Try to make something out of, I don't want to say nothing, but sometimes it's next to nothing, that is meaningful and useful for learners.
Well, thank you. And for those of you who haven't seen Ricky's videos of these lessons, they're available at the Challenger Center online. I think it's challengercenter.org. And I watched all of them multiple times as we were working on this project, and highly recommend that you do the same. So in the same vein of teaching, Kris, you teach in Hopkinton, and you were one of the first interviews that Rebecca and I conducted for this project. And we were sitting in Live Juice at the time, I remember. And we were sitting there over the summer. Contrary to today, it was very hot out. And you were telling us about how you shape your curriculum in ways that are inspired by Christa. And just here tonight earlier, Amber, I believe you called her a field trip teacher. So we were wondering, Kris, if you could tell us a little bit more about kind of that influence in the way that you interact with your students.
One of the things that, like I said, we were always busy. We were always doing in our classroom with her. So I have made sure that my classroom runs in a similar vein. The kids, they earn money. They get a weekly paycheck. Their desk is rented, and they pay rent monthly. There are various deductions. Eventually, they can purchase their desk when they've saved enough money, and everything's like a digital spreadsheet for them, that they maintain some money skills, and they earn interest. They can purchase their desk, become a property owner, and they get a little deed for it, and then they become a taxpayer. So those type of, so then, and it's what's really intriguing is each year the kids will be like, but if I buy his desk first, then I'm collecting rent. Because once they own their property, they can buy other property and collect rent. The bank, myself, does not collect that rent. So as a teacher, my goal is really to keep the kids involved. Anything critical thinking for them, to me, is so important. I would say working so hard to keep up with this digital era and somehow entwine that into their lives is important. But any way I can get them up and moving. There are days where we'll put all the desks on the perimeter of the classroom, and the kids will work on the floor. In those days, it's such a shift in their mind. They work so hard, so well, because it's just different. We've got whiteboards all over the room. They stand up anytime they want, for especially math, problem solving, or spelling activities, just anything to keep them moving, critical thinking. And I really felt that was a passion of Christa's when we were her student. Yeah.
You were one of, I think, 5 of Krista's students who we spoke to during this project. I spoke to Holly Marrow and Tammy Hickey, who are also teachers, and you all reiterated the same sentiment, that you didn't necessarily become teachers because of Krista, but that the way that she taught inspired the way that you teach.
Correct.
And that you bring the lessons that you learned in her classroom, specifically in the way that you relate to your students. You bring those lessons into your classes.
Yeah, she would really reach out to every student, the quietest of quiet students, and really pull them in to get them to engage in the lesson. And it was kind of funny because she would wait them out, and then there's all these, chatty ones. We're like, well, let's go. They don't want to talk. And but she really felt that whole class participation was so important, and for them, the students who were quiet, not to be left out and to really bring what they know out to the rest of us. And so it was great as like an egotistical kid where you're like, come on, let's move. But to watch her and almost stop time where for a few minutes I wasn't egocentric and I was watching what she was doing, and I've tried very, very hard to emulate that in my classroom. Because she really changed some students' lives who didn't have it easy.
Yeah, you all expressed that same idea that I try to see my students as people. I befriend them because that is how Krista treated me. So thanks for those reflections. Kathleen, your documentary is in and of itself a kind of educational experience. It's designed for viewers of all ages, from students to folks who were alive during the Challenger launch and who remember Krista and that day so well. We're reporters, so naturally when we approached you, we were really interested in your process and kind of, I'm sure that our audience members are also interested in how you went about producing your documentary. So could you tell us a bit more about your reporting, producing process, how you pieced together this story, and how you determined your scope, just these basic questions about how your documentary came to be?
Sure. A lot of it was research, and I wanted to just talk about what Kris said, because in doing the research, and I don't have the stats about this, but I'm wondering how many students of Krista's became teachers, because it just feels like so many people who were at the school at that time got into education in some way or another. So I think that would be really interesting to find out. The way I approached the documentary, well, it came to New Hampshire PBS because of the statue being unveiled. And, to the credit of the managers at New Hampshire PBS, they believed that this was an important story to tell. It's what we do really well at New Hampshire PBS, and I felt really honored to be given the project. And Jean Jalowskis, who worked at the Discovery Center, I met with her to talk about how the commission that was in charge of having the statue built, what they were looking at for the sculptor themselves, who was going to build the statue. And one thing she really emphasized that became my thesis was she really wanted to emphasize the legacy of Christa McAuliffe. And I did do a ton of research. I watched a lot of documentaries, and a lot of them focused on, of course, the disaster. And it was a decision that I made really early on that I was going to focus on how she lived and not how she died. And almost to the point where I had some people say, like, afterwards, during the rough cut that I put out, they were like, you have to have something in there about what happened, because I had ignored it so much. I had just really emphasized her as a teacher, her as a citizen. So I also made sure, or not made sure, but I didn't want to have a voiceover. I didn't want like a voice talking about what happened to Krista. I wanted all the people I interviewed to talk about what happened, and people that knew her. And I interviewed over 20 people, and sadly not everybody could make the cut, because it was just really difficult to fit all the voices in there. And of course, it also was a lot about how the statue was created, and the unveiling, which was really inspirational. Yeah, so thanks.
Well, thank you so much for taking us more into your process. We both watched your documentary multiple times throughout our own reporting process. And I remember being really struck early on when we talked about how you had those two very clear goals for what you wanted it to be. And we also tried to strike a similar balance in our own reporting, focusing very much on how she lived, while also needing to acknowledge what happened. And so definitely a similar endeavor in terms of how do we navigate that. And thinking about kind of these questions of legacy and the way that she's present in the Concord community, we wouldn't be here tonight if not in large part because of the work that the Discovery Center has done. So there's the statue by the State House, and here the Discovery Center also bears Christa's name along with Alan Shepard's. And so there's a new exhibit, which all of you hopefully walked through on your way here tonight, that puts on public display a tremendous trove of condolence cards, letters, newspaper clippings. There's a Cabbage Patch doll that was custom made in Christa's likeness, and other sentimental gifts that were sent to Concord in the wake of the Challenger disaster from all around the world. And Amber has been working diligently cataloging all of these items and digitizing them. And so we're really curious to learn more about kind of how the Discovery Center came into contact or possession of these items, and what that process has looked like for you, and how you got to the point where you're able to share some of them with us in the beautiful display that you all have.
It's been a long process. Immediately following the disaster, Concord High School began receiving thousands of pieces of correspondence from people across the globe, just wanting to express their sympathy for the loss. And so initially Concord High School held the collection for a period of time. They also responded to quite a lot of those letters that were sent to them. But it was around the 90s when the Christa McAuliffe Planetarium was built that we obtained the collection, and it's been stored here ever since. It was just this past year that we started going through this collection. As I said, there are thousands of pieces of mail, letters, sympathy cards. So it's taken us quite a bit of time. We're still in the initial stages of organizing and accessioning or adding it to our collection. So not only did we get letters and sympathy cards, we got pieces of art, we got musical compositions, we had pieces of poetry, so there are countless things to go through. So our goal and what we've put forth for the exhibit is just the beginning. We're going to continue to add more to the collection, and we are going to have it available digitally very soon, and more things will be added to our online hub.
Yeah, Rachel and I were lucky enough to visit the archival room over the summer, and it is just a treasure trove of so many different items. And I can still remember this kind of pink satin cushion that was, I think, the most peculiar and interesting piece in there. But there were articles in foreign languages. Rachel used some of her French to kind of decipher what was in one. But we know that you brought some items to share with us. So could you tell us just a little bit about what surprised you most about this experience of cataloging the archives, and then share those items with us?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that has surprised me while going through the archive, and specifically this collection, is that the Challenger event, I don't really have the greatest word for it, but it was kind of like a touchstone, a moment in time where people remember how old they were, where they were, what they were doing. And it wasn't just a touchstone for the people of Concord High School or New Hampshire or just the United States. It was a touchstone across the globe. Everyone in the world was impacted. So it's been very touching and inspiring reading a lot of these heartfelt letters of sympathy and all the cards that were sent. And we have some I brought with me. These are just a few selections of the thousands that we have gone through. So I have a few examples of handmade cards that some children made from Newcastle, England. This really highlights the aspect that even young children, elementary school age, when they didn't have quite maybe the words to express their sympathy, they still crafted cards, made out of construction paper and crayons in some points. But these are some of the cards that we have, and it's from St. Vincent's Primary School. And we have a few on the front. It's a picture of the Challenger shuttle. And the letter itself says, "I am Alan Barlow, and I come from St. Vincent's School in Newcastle. I'm very sorry to hear about the accident. I'm very sorry, and Miss McAuliffe was very brave. Love, Alan Barlow." And little astronaut standing on the Earth. So these are grades 3 and 4. Yeah, very good artists we have from this class. This is another one. We are very sorry, another Challenger shuttle. And this one says, "We are very sorry for what happened to your teacher with the shuttle. She was very brave to go in the spaceship." From Paul Mann. I'm still deciphering children's handwriting. It's a skill I'm still learning. We have another shuttle drawing. And the letter says, "My name is Sasha Wingham. All of our class have been praying about the terrible disaster. We think your teacher is very brave for risking her life. I'm sure you will remember her. Lots of love, Sasha." And the last one from that school, another little person on the moon. And it says, "Dear Concord High School, I'm very sorry to hear the news about the shuttle disaster. We all hope there will be another Challenger and lots more brave teachers. We all hope it won't be long before they send astronauts into space so the teacher can tell other people about space when he or she goes with them. I'm sorry also to her family, but we also should congratulate Christa for being a very brave woman. Yours sincerely, Patricia Turney." Yeah, so those are some of the beautiful cards that we received. We also received a lot of letters, and I have a few that we've brought here. So this one is from Limerick, Ireland. It's from St. Paul's National School. And this is written by a class teacher, and added to this were all the students' letters, but she had a very beautiful letter. It says, "Dear students, there are no words to describe how shocked we were here in St. Paul's School to learn of the space shuttle disaster. We had followed with great interest the preparations, and like you, looked forward to success. Though removed by distance, tragedy bridges that gap, and we want you to know how deeply sorry we are. I know how proud you must have been of Christa McAuliffe. You have every reason to be. Her task and wish was to prepare you for the future. We do not always understand God's ways, but we must learn to accept them. I know that in time, this awful tragedy will strengthen you. My class of 38 9 to 10-year-olds have displayed such deep feeling for the children of your school that 9, although far more than 9 students wrote, wanted you to know you have the hopes and prayers of teachers and children everywhere. For this alone, Christa McAuliffe's death was not in vain. You are sincerely Noreen Brooks, class teacher."
That's lovely. Thank you so much.
Rebecca and I could have spent probably a whole week in the archives with you looking through all of these things. We only got to spend part of a morning, I believe, but I can only imagine how fascinating it must be to get to really interact with these letters and these drawings and these artifacts in such a close manner. And to be able to have some of them on display. I was here yesterday watching them put up the finishing touches, and it was just really cool to kind of see those elements brought to life. And thank you for reading them for us. So shifting gears a little bit, both Rebecca and I were really fascinated in our project and our reporting process to learn more about Christa's training, first as a teacher in space candidate and then as a payload specialist slated to fly aboard Challenger. She experienced weightlessness during a parabolic flight in the, quote, vomit comet, which Ricky mentioned earlier. And she underwent sensory deprivation testing and carefully planned her lessons and rehearsed them months in advance. And so, Ricky, when we spoke a couple of months ago in our interview, you shared that in some ways it felt, I think what you said is like going back to school. And so, similar to Christa, you were a teacher going back to school, this time space school, and transitioning from the classroom to NASA. Can you tell us more about kind of what that training process looked like and how it would have mirrored what Christa experienced?
Yeah, Yes, that's thinking about or just arriving to NASA and having to learn an entirely new language and way of thinking was overwhelming. Her experience was different than mine as a payload specialist. Her training would have been shorter. She would have been trained, I think, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but certainly had training with her experiments on basic operations within the space shuttle, how to prepare your meals, how to use the restroom, where your stuff would be stowed, how to open lockers, all of those other kind of things. What to do in case of an emergency would certainly have been part of her training. As someone who was brought in as a mission specialist, I had to learn how all of the systems worked on the space shuttle. And if you've ever seen pictures of the cockpit, and I think Chris and I would have had the same experience walking into a space shuttle simulator for the first time, it's a bit overwhelming. Most complicated machine ever built by human beings. It's so complicated one person really can't fly it. There are probably thousands of switches within the cockpit, and then a whole bunch more down in the mid-deck. I think there's two ways that I approach this that I think she would have appreciated. One, I mean, you just have to, primarily you just have to attack the problem and not be overwhelmed by the problem. You start and very methodically build your knowledge base. But there are two ways that I remember specifically, and there's a whole bunch of other examples. I mean, I think of her, like her first time getting in a T-38 jet, right, a supersonic trainer. It was overwhelming for me. I'd been in a commercial airplane before, but all I had to figure out was how to turn on the TV screen at the back of my seat. So when it came to the space shuttle, the way I tackled that was I practiced a lot, I studied a lot, and I became friends with one of the simulator. We had a single system trainer. So you would go in and learn how to use the hydraulic system, and that's all you would learn how to do. Then a week later, you would learn how to use the main engines, and that's all you would do. And then another week, you would go and you'd learn every system, environmental life support, the electrical system, the data processing system. And you'd build all these single system, this knowledge base up, and then you would go into a simulator which would kind of weave them all together, right? So it's very methodical and very tried and true, because NASA had been doing this for a long time. But I started talking to one of my instructors, and he had mentioned that he'd been fiddling around with this single system trainer, and he thought he could program it to start integrating systems earlier than I was going to get in the training flow, so he could actually, and then we could sustain it throughout the training flow. And he did. He figured out how to do it. And Eloise will tell you, I don't know how many Saturdays and Sundays I get up in the morning and go to Johnson Space Center with one of my classmates and just sit in that trainer practicing, working through procedures. I could sit in a classroom for hours on end and wouldn't have figured it out. I had to do it, which I think when you talk about field trips and the kind of the learning model. Another way I approach this, NASA printed out and handed out these white things. They gave us like a white printed out roll. It almost looked like Christmas paper of all the panels which had all these switches in the space shuttle. And they gave them to us. I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? You know, I can't. And I actually filed them away. They were sitting in the house somewhere. I had a friend of mine came down. He was Canadian, still is. That he and his wife came down to visit, and he asked, what are these things here? And I pulled it out, started showing it to him. He's like, huh. So I went to work, and I came home one day, and there on our dining room table was a model of the space shuttle cockpit. He had gone to a hardware store. This guy was a great teacher. Bought PVC, bought hardstock, cut out all the individual panels, glued it to the hardstock, and then mounted all the hardstock to this PVC framework, which took up our whole dining room table for the better part of a year. And so when you sat down at the dining room table in your chair, you were sitting, if you would never have flown on this thing, but for all intents and purposes, you were sitting in the space shuttle with all the switches. And so I would sit there with the procedures in the living room, or in our dining room, and, okay, that's where that switch is. Okay, that's where that switch is. Okay, this is where that switch is. And just to kind of build some muscle memory of how this really complex machine flew. I think, you know, those learning methods, I think something she would have appreciated. I can also say, I think with confidence, that there's an expression that I'm sure she became familiar with, drinking from a fire hose, because that's how all NASA training is done. And you arrive, you're given more information than one human being could possibly process in a lifetime. And then you got to parse out what of that information is important to you, and how do you utilize it. And so I think walking into that situation would have been really overwhelming. But if, as you said, this is a person who understood how people learn and took those same skills and got through the training successfully.
It's so fascinating to learn about that training. I had the luck to meet Bob Forster, who's one of the 10 finalists for
Right.
Teacher in Space, and he described this experience of kind of sitting in a duffel bag and being subjected to sensory deprivation training, and that was just the start of it, by the sound of it.
That training, yeah, that used to be a screening thing for astronauts. They put you
for
in something.
claustrophobia, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They've done away with it. I didn't have to do that. But because then people would figure out, okay, I'll just go in there and go to sleep. So then they spent half the time trying to keep people awake. And yeah, you always hear the kind of the gamesmanship that goes along with that.
Yeah.
So, but they did away with that. But that sounds perfectly horrible.
Well, it's just fascinating learning more about the training process.
Yeah.
You and other panelists have touched on this idea of Christa as the field trip teacher. This question will be directed to Kris, but throughout our project, we found ourselves back at Concord High on numerous occasions. We watched footage from the Senior Assembly of 1985, which I think you were present at, where Christa said goodbye to the class of 1986. I spoke with the current head of the history department, who incidentally you babysat, who lived on your street, and you can read more about Kimberly Blyer in our special edition, where she talks about how the history department carries Christa's legacy forward and the way that it teaches its curriculum, the kinds of classes that it offers. Kris, could you tell us just a few memories from your high school years as Christa's students, some of your favorite memories from that time?
I think she always would greet us at the door, but also when you were walking down the hall, you could hear her laughter, and it was just a very welcoming noise or sound to hear. In general, favorite times of high school or with Christa, I guess going on field trips, we went to the courthouse a couple of times. We did some mock trials that were a blast. And we did a lot of debating in the classroom, which I really liked. And one aspect that I liked is, she would ask your opinion and which side you would take, and then she would switch it, so you had to defend the opposite side. So you would have to really strengthen yourself in that way. So that was, I think that was very masterful and well done. I think as the school, the staff, the way they handled the accident, not understanding at that time that, she was their friend and their colleague, and how hard it was for them from a different perspective, and also that they were caring for us at the same time. They couldn't have done a better job. And so my tributes to them now.
We met several different classroom teachers throughout our reporting process who were teaching the day of the Challenger
Yeah.
launch, who were live streaming with their students, and had to figure out how to react while
Yep.
also like taking care of their class.
Yep.
And something that we were interested in asking you more about is how the community rallied together in the aftermath to honor Christa, because you were at Concord High 40 years ago today. And so thinking about kind of what happened after that, I mean, we know that these tributes to Christa were sent from all around the world, as Amber read for us, but how did that sense of community manifest in Concord, at Concord High?
I think initially everything was there was just so much shock for all of us, and everybody just supported everybody, whether you were an adult or a child. We were there for each other, and for a bit of time we were out of school, but when we came back, there was stuff everywhere. There were stuffed animals, there were cards, there were balloons, there were flowers. It was a very heartfelt outpouring, because as much as, I mean, being egocentric again, she was ours, you know, and you know, the world was invested in it, but you know, we loved her. We were ever so proud of her. The school organized a special event where it was only kids and it was only staff, and it was in the gym, and people, it was like our own memorial service for her, and it was so wonderful that they did it, and I'm sure it was so hard for the adults, the staff, to have this twofold role of grieving a colleague and friend and taking care of the kids at the school, but it was a very important moment for us to be able to come together. Anybody could stand and say anything they wanted. One touching moment was a student had written to her, and the student was just like struggling about where he was in his life goals of school, and he didn't hear back from her right away, but he ended up hearing back from her, and in some span of time had dropped out of school, and at that memorial that we privately held for her, he came back in and announced that he had re-enrolled in school. So her letter to him, as much as it didn't come as quickly as he would have liked, made such an impact that, you know, he came back to school. And I just think the huge scope of what everybody had to deal with, they did a phenomenal job taking care of the kids, us.
Mm.
Yeah.
We've heard so many accounts of Christa's character as a testament to her legacy, because it lives on in the memories of her students. Her kind-heartedness, her tenderness, her respect for her students. I think it was Tammy Hickey who said that when you saw her in the hallway, she wasn't reprimanding,
No.
she was a friend.
Yeah.
And so we really genuinely thank you for your vulnerability with us now. And at the beginning of this process, like Rachel said, you were one of our first sources, so thank you a million times over. I spent part of last week at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida covering NASA's Day of Remembrance, and what struck me most about the ceremony was kind of its tenor. It's the same kind of tone that we've tried to strike with our reporting. It was reverent, honoring the lives of NASA's fallen astronauts. It was very contrite about the organization's past failures, but in the same breath, kind of optimistic about the future of space exploration. And I gathered this understanding that from NASA, that if we gave up on returning to the moon or going to Mars or all of these kind of future future missions, that we would be dishonoring the sacrifices made by people like Christa and Dick Scobie and Mike Smith and the other members of the Challenger crew. And so, Ricky, this question will be for you, but could you share more about how NASA as an institution continues to commemorate Christa and her legacy, and the legacy of the Challenger crew during your time there?
I think the first way that they honored was they solved the problems as they understood them and kept flying, right? That the mission continues. I don't think any crew member would want their flight, no matter what happened to them, to be the last time humans stopped trying to do amazing things. You can't do hard things without risk. So we kept going. We kept flying the space shuttle. We learned another hard lesson. Took a couple years off and figured out what we needed to do and went back. We finished building the International Space Station, which I think was a really important accomplishment because it brought international partners into this endeavor. And we're continuing now to head out into the solar system. We're looking forward to watching the crew of Artemis 2. I think the way we remember is the way you alluded to, Rebecca, the Day of Remembrance. We pause every year and remember people we've lost along the way. And this is not, we stop what we're doing wherever we are. At Johnson Space Center, we'd walk out to the Memorial Grove where we have trees planted honoring people who have since passed. And T-38 flies the missing man formation. And we stop and pause. I did the same thing at Kennedy Space Center. I've been a spectator and I've been in the airplane doing the missing man formation. We actually have a safety stand down internally with all the aviation and astronaut and flight operations community to talk about safety and crew safety. So I think, continuing the mission, doing it as safely as we can, and continuing to push, pass that torch forward to the next generation, right? Those are three things that, as we're doing here, as you do at this center, at Challenger centers, schools across the country, in your classroom. We have to have things that kids can aspire to. Great things. Because that's what we as humans are capable of doing when we put our minds to it. So, I think the crew, and I can speak as a crew member who's had to deal with going and strapping myself into a rocket and not knowing what the outcome's going to be, but hoping for the best, that they would be honored by the way we have carried on the legacy, and in ways they probably couldn't have imagined. Like us sitting here talking about it tonight, like having former students and PBS and all the archived letters from around the world. I guarantee you they weren't thinking about that, and probably in their wildest dreams would not have thought about that. But, we've carried on.
One thing that I was really struck by throughout this process was I wrote a series of profiles on each of the crew members and learned just how many places are named after them, not just around the country, around the world, but also in outer space. There are spacecrafts carrying the names of Challenger crew members. I believe there are also comets and different elements of pieces that have gone from NASA into space in the years since. A soccer ball that belonged to Ellison Onizuka that was gifted to him by the soccer team that he coached at his daughter's school was later flown into space by another astronaut from NASA whose child went to that same school. So the tributes to these crew members are far-reaching in scope. There are airfields named after them, scholarships, buildings, you name it. And here in Concord, one of our biggest tributes to Christa McAuliffe is the statue which was erected on her birthday, September 2nd, in 2024. And one of the elements of Kathleen's documentary is following the process of creating that statue all the way to the day that it is unveiled. And we were wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how that fit into your vision and your process, especially because your project was released just a few weeks afterwards, which is, I imagine, very short notice, or a short turnaround time for something that played such a large role in your project. So tell us about kind of capturing that element of Christa's legacy and how you were able to get it in so quickly.
Yeah. Well, I think something that kept me going was that the sculptor, Ben Victor, had an even shorter turnaround time than I did. So I kept saying, if he can do it, I can do this as well. So there's another documentary out that Idaho did about his process, and you can see how difficult it was to get that statue delivered in time. So it was a quick turnaround time, but I think I just felt like I owed it to everyone, and including Christa herself, to get it done and get it out there. So yeah.
Yeah, and if you haven't visited the statue yet, you absolutely should, and you should watch more about it in the documentary.
Thanks. I think one thing I would love to say is that the statue itself is so inspiring because it's a woman on the State House lawn who's an educator amongst all these men who are statesmen, who, you know, we can think about them in all sorts of different ways, but I think I just really commend the fact that Concord had, or the state had, the foresight to have a woman who's an educator there to inspire future generations.
Rachel and I paid many visits to the State House during our reporting process, and Jeff, our photographer, who is around here somewhere, he and I went to the State House for the Gilmanton Elementary School's tour, and the woman who runs the visitor center there, Virginia Drew, said that, you know, she looked out at these fourth graders and told us it's very common for fourth graders to see eternalized statesmen, politicians who have, of course, played their role in shaping the history of the state, of the country, but it's so rare for them to see someone who they can identify in their own personal lives, someone who was a parent, who was a teacher, just like the one that they, you know, who was chaperoning their trip. And so just this like wonderful touchstone for these kids. So, you know, we're almost at the time where we'll begin taking audience questions, but for our final question to our panelists right now, we'd love to hear briefly from each of you what you're hoping these younger generations will learn from Christa and the Challenger crew, fourth graders like the ones who visit the State House each year, or even younger kids. Ricky, we can start with you. Not to put you on the spot.
Hard things are worth doing, right? The Earth faces a lot of challenges right now. And it's not going to get easier, but we can address a lot of these challenges. They're going to be hard, but they're worth doing. And the only way to do it is kind of like we explore space now, together, cooperatively. And when we work together as a team, we can make amazing things happen.
Well, we were supposed to go Tuesday, but we had a 2-hour delay, so my class did not go to see the statue on Tuesday. But I do love that all the kids in the state will get to go. My hope for the next step would be there would be a Christa McAuliffe Day in New Hampshire. It doesn't have to be like on the anniversary of the explosion. I love that the statue was erected on her birthday, and it focused on that joy. I hope kids never stop learning, never stop evolving, always going after what drives them, what gives them passion, and just continue to change and be the best person they can as they grow old.
I truly believe that Christa did not pursue becoming the first teacher in space in order to elevate herself. I think she did it to elevate the field of education. And she wanted to bring attention to the importance of education and the importance of what teachers do for the world. So I would hope that students take away the fact that there's a path in life that is more important than maybe likes or making a ton of money, that there are paths to making the world a better place, like she, I think, was trying to do and did.
I hope that younger generations take the lessons from Christa and from the Challenger crew, which I took from them myself, is that learning is a lifelong pursuit. There is no finish line. Christa really believed in the idea that curiosity and knowledge extends past the classroom. And she believed that education can take you anywhere, especially into space. So I hope that younger generations take their legacy as an invitation to continue to be curious, to push boundaries, and to, as Christa always said, reach for the stars, because there is no end in sight.
Well, we can't thank all of you enough for sharing everything that you shared with us tonight, and for being part of this story that we are all continuing. Our editor, John, is kind enough to volunteer to circulate with a microphone. So if anyone in the audience has questions, if there's anything that any of our panelists shared that you want to learn more about, or something that we didn't talk about here tonight that you're interested in, we invite you to raise your hand and he'll come find you with a microphone. And you can ask a question to all of our panelists. You can ask to a specific person. You can address questions to Rebecca or myself if it has to do with our reporting process. But yeah, we wanted to set aside some time for all of you and to give you space to ask anything that you're wondering about.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Dave Roy, and I remember the shuttle disaster. Worked in downtown Concord, and what I remember about that time most was how proud the city was to have a teacher go into space. It was a tragic day, but Concord is a strong community that came through it. Personally, myself, I love astronomy, and what I love about astronomy the most, what I found is I love the stars and everything else, but I love teaching the children. You go to Sky Watches, and you get a line of kids, and they learn something, and it's just so rewarding. Full circle for me. I volunteer at the Discovery Center now, and I love this place. So, proud of Christa. Thank you.
Nice.
Do you have a question for any of the panelists?
No, just a comment, that's all.
Well, thank you, Dave. And I will say also, Dave has played a very large role in the new exhibit, as you all saw it. I visited multiple times over the past few weeks and months, and every time I felt like Dave was there doing whatever needed to be done. So shout out to you.
Hi, I'm Wendy from Concord. I really appreciated the profiles of all of the astronauts that were part of the mission. And I just wondered, we've been looking at this wonderful photo throughout your presentation. Do we have any research, or was there any information from the other members of the crew about how they felt about Christa, or how they felt about having a layperson or a teacher as part of their group? That picture shows she seems so engaged, and everything we know about her, but I'm just curious if you had any insight into that.
That's a great question. I had the honor of speaking with June Scobie Rogers, who is the wife of Challenger Commander Dick Scobie, and she shared how excited her husband was when the Teacher in Space project was announced, and then when Christa was assigned to fly as part of his crew. June herself is a teacher, and so her husband felt that particular connection, then having a teacher on his crew. And she shared how the crew itself really functioned as a group. One of my absolute favorite photos is of them sitting around a breakfast table together. And I was able to talk with people who worked at NASA 40 years ago who interacted with the crew through experiments that they were conducting pre-flight, and they talked too about how the crew would sit in someone's living room and watch soccer games together. So it sounds very much to me like they were more than just people who worked together. They shared the same goals of going up into space, but that was part of a larger dream, and also they were very united in their value of education. And so having Christa as a member of their team, I mean, I can't speak for them, obviously, but from everything that I've read, it seemed like it was just a wonderful added bonus.
Just to add something quickly, one of the speakers at the Day of Remembrance was Allison Smith Belch, who is the daughter of Mike Smith, the pilot on the Challenger. One thing that she said is that all of the Challenger crew members were lifelong learners and teachers in their own right. And so just to kind of validate what Rachel is saying, I wasn't there, I don't know, but it sounds like, you know, the children of the crew members saw them as wonderful parents, community members, but as teachers who would have valued having an educator among them. Allison talked about the kind of landscaping business that her dad created with all of her siblings, and Ellison Onizuka invited Bob Cabana, who was the director of the Kennedy Space Center at the time, to come into his garage, and he would teach him how to fix up his car. You know, so they were all very invested in the mission of education, and so I can't imagine that they would have ostracized Christa, or, you know, it seems like they were all teachers who, in their own spheres, they were all teachers in one way or another.
I wanted to mention too that in one of the interviews that I saw with Christa, she mentioned that the first Teacher in Space was part of a project of having citizens in general go to space. Mm-hmm. So this was, you know, first a teacher, then perhaps a journalist, then a poet, but she was really thinking that, and I think she talked to her students like, get ready, like we're all going to be going up to space frequently. Citizens will be going all the time. So I don't know if the NASA program was training the astronauts to get ready for citizens in general to be going.
I think that was the plan.
Yeah.
I don't know how they couldn't welcome her. She was such a warm person.
I just had a question for Amber. You said you had thousands of pieces of evidence and of history from this time period. What is if you have one, the established timeline for when this might get released to the public and when you might go digital with it?
So we've already have some stuff available digitally. We're going to be putting that link very soon on our website. As of right now, we have a lot of international mail available that will be available on our digital hub. But it's going to take time to go through all these pieces. Right now, currently, I am working on organizing all of the United States mail, and that alone is the biggest chunk, and I am only halfway through, and I've gone through probably 3,000 letters. So it's going to take time not only to put it into our collection, but also to digitize every single piece of paper. So just keep an eye on our collection link. You can check to see if new things are added, but we are working every day to make sure more of the stuff is available, not just to people to come in to see them, because some of our pieces are now on display, but we want to make everybody around the world able to view this collection, because it is really just a testament to Christa's legacy.
Hi. Before I ask this question, I want to make sure I'm getting this right. Did I read that she studied art history?
I don't believe she studied art history, but maybe I'm wrong.
Do we know what her degree was in? I thought I read that out there.
So as far as I know, she started off studying education and then shifted to history at Framingham State, which Rebecca and I actually visited in the fall.
Oh, okay, that's what I was checking. I was like, oh, I wasn't sure what her degree was in because she went to Framingham State?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, that was my question.
She grew up in Framingham, and I just wanted to say that I was down on a panel discussion down at the Learning Center there, and there is a disconnect a little bit between Concord and Framingham, because she grew up in Framingham, and her mom lived there, and her sister, and she had a lot of family, and they kind of claim her to be theirs. And she, which is kind of remarkable, I think she only lived in Concord for maybe 6 years. You know, but she taught here and she, you know, had her family here, but
She immersed herself.
she did.
in the community.
And it's hard, you know, they don't really look at Concord as where she was from. And we, of course, do. So it's just interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, here's a little bit of Framingham lore. I had a discussion with the head of the Framingham History Center, who shared with me that she wasn't able to confirm this, but legend has it in Framingham that Christa was the first person to wear a strapless dress to prom. And so I thought that was a really cool tidbit. Obviously, we can't confirm the historical fact, but that comes directly from the Framingham History Center.
Uh-huh.
I believe it.
And while I make it over here, I wanted to add that you included that in one of your articles, and I was like, how do we really know this, Rachel? But we let it go.
That was a discussion that we had, yes.
Thank you. I'm Mark Hampton. I was a colleague and friend of Christa at Concord High School. I taught Spanish and French for many years. A couple of memories. About 2 months before the flight, Christa came back to visit us at the high school. She came into the cafeteria. I happened to have cafeteria duty that time of the day. And she saw me, came over, gave me a big hug. We sat down at the table and chatted for about 10, 15 minutes. We both were very active runners back then. And we talked about that. We talked about her experience with NASA. And finally, she had to go, and she gave me a big hug. And I had chills down my back because I had this premonition that I would never see her again. It was horrible. The other thing I would mention is a year later, Chubb Life, which was back then a big company in Concord, established a summer fellowship for one teacher from the district. And we were asked to submit projects that would be used in the classroom. And I submitted a videotape project for my Spanish classes and was very fortunate to be named the first recipient of that fellowship. And it was a wonderful experience. I went to Spain with my family for the summer and did videotaping, which I used in the classroom. And I was very, as I mentioned, very fortunate to have that experience.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
All right, so I'm glad people are sharing their memories and thoughts. When I was a senior, I got a letter in the mail that I was receiving an academic award. And so we went to awards night, and I didn't know in what capacity this award would come. But I was the recipient of the first Christa McAuliffe Social Studies Award. And I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better award, so it was great.
other questions or any memories or stories that anyone wants to share?
In addition to Mark Hampton that just spoke, we got at least one other teacher from Concord High.
Yeah.
In addition to Mark Hampton that just spoke, I know that we have at least one other teacher here tonight that taught aside Christa McAuliffe, Jay Godfrey, and I don't know if there's anybody else out there as well.
Do you have any stories, Mr. Godfrey? Or no?
Hi, I'm Jay Godfrey, and now that Mark said he had a premonition about something could go wrong, I had the same damn thing the morning before the Challenger went up. I told one other person, but it's like that. I wish I didn't have that premonition. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Any other questions or any other lingering thoughts that any of our panelists have as we've been chatting tonight?
I just wanted to thank you all for allowing us to commemorate Christa in this way. It's really nice.
Well, we wouldn't have been able to do it without all of you, so we really appreciate it.
All right.
I haven't looked through this yet, but it looks like you two have done an amazing job, and I hope you are so proud of yourselves and what you've accomplished.
Thanks. We appreciate it. Well, seeing no other hands, that concludes our event for the evening. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you'll consider picking up a copy of our special edition here at the edge of the stage and continuing to interact with Christa's legacy. Perhaps you'll visit the Discovery Center in the future or visit her statue or just continue to share your memories about her and keep her spirit alive in our community.
And we also want to, again, thank all of our panelists. Thank you to the Discovery Center for your wonderful partnership throughout this whole process, getting us connected with sources, helping us organize this event here tonight, and just being so open and welcoming. A huge thank you to Concord TV up there for spending your Wednesday night live streaming so that people can watch this from wherever they are if it's not here. And thank you to NHTI for providing the space, and thank you to all of you, especially those of you who shared your memories, but really thank you to all of you for reading our reporting, for being here tonight, and for continuing to support Christa and her legacy, and also support the Monitor, because this project has been really meaningful for all of us, and we appreciate you for reading it.
Thank you.